Military concept of the warriors battling the wolf, protecting the flock, and it kind of transfers over to a lot of any career that is public safety driven. Police, obviously, fire, us, in that we're there for the protection of those that need our help. And it may not be protection to prevent something bad from happening all the time. A lot of times from our end of it, it's after things have gone wrong. And so we're coming in to kind of help them. So in a way, collectively, we're all sheepdogs. And now that has become a moniker for police, fire, EMS, but can easily transfer over to anyone who's in a public safety or humanitarian type profession.
But you know, society says if you have a problem, call 911. So, you know, when somebody calls 911 with a problem, there's really only three alternatives. You have fire, EMS, and police. Fire and EMS are very well defined in what they do, what services they can provide. Police, you know, unfortunately get tasked with a lot more of stuff that isn't defined by what they should be doing. So, you know, and I think look at the calls here and how busy we are with things, and you can see, you know, there's, you know,
so you got a psychiatric accident,
cardiac arrest, accident, disorderly subject, robbery,
larceny,
mental health call, larceny, intoxicated, vice, domestic. So that's, you know, all of those things that, you know, police get tasked with addressing. And I think it's a lot we put on our officers. And, you know, and it's not only the amount of work we put on our officers, but society has such a high expectation of our officers that they expect them to go out and, you know, to almost be perfect. They can't make mistakes, you know. Mistakes they do make are just, you know, highly scrutinized. Car 4 on dispatch 3.
Go ahead.
You can send me that traffic hazard call Holden on South Holden.
10 Brock.
I mean, how do you manage all this? Like reading these notes and going down the road?
Yeah, a lot of.
Because I mean, it's just a one-man
practice and experience. I mean,
Thank you very much.
It's one thing. I've been out of this function in policing for quite a while, but it's something that, you know, officers have to learn starting day one. You know, this is their tough book. Their laptop is kind of their connection to comm and information. Things get updated. You know, we have 4 patrol divisions. We have a center city team. We have additional support units that are working. So there could be, you know, 40, 50 officers at any point in time on a radio. And obviously, you know, you can't manage information through.
Units on Hatcher Place, EMS.
You can't manage it through a radio with a volume of traffic. And so a lot of that information has to be handled through the tough book and call notes and updating the call notes. I will say I don't think it takes long. Once you've started doing it, it becomes second nature. Wow. Officer workload. As an agency, we've been doing a lot of evaluation on, what our officers do, how often they're required to do that, in terms of the types of calls that are required to go on.
305, signal 50.
How much time they spend on those calls. And we've been working with a nonprofit research organization to kind of guide us in some of the work. And it's amazing when you look at the volume of our calls. And as Greensboro Police Department, we probably, on average, answer 200 to 225,000 calls in a year.
3123, signal 50.
Somewhere in the range of 80 to 85% of those calls are not even related to crime. They're a traffic hazard call, they're a mental health call, a crash that we're required to investigate, but there's no significant crime affiliated with it. Helping individuals, animal calls. I mean, just the plethora of calls that they're required to go on. And I think it would be shocking if the average person understood, they think police, hey, they're out here to fight crime. They're out here to, solve the crime issues, when overwhelmingly the majority of work we do is, I would say it's the serve portion, where we're serving the citizens. But where we have to evaluate that is we're, about 100 officers short right now. So when we're that short, we have to figure out a way to be a little more efficient with our manpower and figure out if we're really doing all the work we need to be doing. So,
what do you think the attribution is to losing officers? I mean, is this fairly recent trend in the past couple of years?
It's been
R3223, signal 50.
it's been cyclical, over the last 10, 15, 16 years. And usually we could follow that trend when you looked at economy. Back in 08, 09, economic issues, people are out of jobs. They want to look for steady employment, good job benefits. That might drive people to law enforcement. As the economy turns around, there's better paying options, more lucrative opportunities, and they're not engaged in a stressful job. That makes it harder to fill. I will say right now, we are facing kind of a perfect storm, because we have a sentiment in society that law enforcement is not a popular profession to be in, and the negative sentiment around communities and politicians makes it difficult to attract individuals. And even though in the middle of a pandemic, we're at a time where it's a worker's advantage in the job market. It's a bidding war to get workers, and so you have starting pay for a fast food restaurant that could be $32,000 a year. If they're paying $15 an hour, starting pay for police is $39,000 a year. So some folks, it's an easy choice. I'll go work at a McDonald's and make the same as I would being a police officer, or I'll go manage a McDonald's and make more than a police officer. So I think the fact that we have that negative sentiment in society for our profession, and I think the fact that the economy is doing as well as it is right now, and I think that perceived labor shortage makes it extremely competitive for individuals, and it's really tough. And it's not just Greensboro. I mean, there's other agencies that are struggling more than we are. But I don't know of an agency right now that isn't struggling to find officers for sure. They're up and running beginning January of this year. The city hired a lead clinician and I believe 6 crisis counselors. And so it's basically it's essentially, it operates as what we refer to as a co-responder model. And so you have police officers that have crisis counselors who ride with them in their car, and their primary function is to respond to mental health calls. And so they're available in the city, and when a mental health call comes up, they would be the first officers contacted if they're available for dispatch. And you're sending an officer and a trained crisis counselor to the call. And so it does 2 things. One is it does relieve some strain. I mean, we still have officers that are going to mental health calls, but they're higher trained officers. They get additional training in de-escalation and understanding mental health and behavioral health. And then they have a crisis counselor with them that can also have higher level of training and education. I think all of our crisis counselors are at least master level education, and I think a few of them actually have like their clinicians. It helps to, the officers really like it because an officer typically doesn't like to go to a mental health call. They don't receive enough training to be able to help and handle it. They're limited in their response. You know, it's like, hey, I can either tell you someplace to go get some help, or I can take you to the hospital. And that's kind of all they have. Where a crisis counselor can talk to the individual, get more information, understand what they're going through, understand better what a resource they may need, connect them, better with resources. So that's the main focus, is recognizing that having professionals that understand behavioral health and mental health and those issues and what the best response is, and having them go out and actually respond to those calls. And then there's a component of follow-up with our crisis counselors where they follow up with individuals that they come in contact with crisis to make sure that they're getting the resources they need, make sure they've made contact with the doctor or a facility, and try to kind of facilitate that connection with resources. It's been extremely positive. One, that the line officer who was out here typically handling those calls, they love it because they don't have to go on those calls as much. And then we've seen a lot of very positive feedback from the community because they're actually getting a professional who's trained in mental health and their understanding of behavioral health issues, responding to their call to give them help. And so it's kind of a dual frustration, when officers have to respond and they're not equipped to help an individual in crisis or with a mental health issue. They're frustrated, and then the citizen's frustrated because they have somebody there who doesn't have the resources to help them. So that program now, January, have been fully functional for a year. They've already looked at starting to expand it. Right now the program is only available full-time Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to I think 10 p.m. is when they're actually here riding around. Crisis counselors are available after hours. They're just not in cars with the officers riding around. It really is a program we could expand to 24/7 with the funding for it. So. And this, I mean, these last two calls, I think, are examples of, I get, you want us to go out to somebody that potentially has an issue if they're walking in traffic, and but you can see, the time it takes to get out there, and you get out there and there's nobody around, there's no issue with it, and somebody calls about a traffic hazard here, signal light's not working. Only one person called. There was nobody else that called. Take you time. You got to travel out here. You got to spend time, make sure there isn't an issue because somebody did call. And this is a lot of what our officers do every single day. They're just running constantly, call to call to call. And, neither of the two issues I dealt with have anything to do with crime, at this point. But this is, sometimes officers will spend their entire day answering calls and never make an arrest, never make a charge, never, deal with a significant crime issue. Make our way downtown and see what's going on down there.
So you kind of have the freedom right now where you can you don't have a district necessarily. I mean, the whole city is your district.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that my position allows me to do this when I have time to do this. And, to be honest, I feel like coming out here and answering calls every once in a while just kind of keeps me grounded a little bit. And this is really, even though I'm not getting in vehicle chases or, handling serious calls or anything. This is what I joined up to do, like get in a police car, go out, try to help people, answer calls. So it keeps me a little bit, I think, connected. It does make me miss at times though, now that I ride a desk. So,
So what's your job? Like, what is your primary role or your primary function now?
So my role, deputy chief over the patrol bureau. So right now I have 4 patrol divisions. Technically, there's a 5th, which is our downtown district, although they're not a district, separate and apart.
32, 34,
10-4.
And so each patrol division has anywhere from 80 to 100 officers, with the exception of our downtown district, which is 2 bike teams of about 10 officers each. So patrol is roughly anywhere from 350 to 400 officers that are assigned. My role now is just kind of twofold. One, I provide very general direction for my captains and lieutenants who are over the patrol districts. So when we talk about crime issues and how we want to address crime, one of our biggest issues right now is gun violence. And so our focus in patrol is our officers should be addressing gun violence. And that's through being in areas where we know gun violence is occurring. And as we go out and interact with individuals, come into contact, we want to take illegal guns off of people who shouldn't be carrying them. So far this year, we have seized approximately 1,500 guns. And to put that into perspective, last year Total, I think we were around 800 or 900. So we're about 60 or 70% up in our firearm seizures. And again, and these aren't seizures of law-abiding citizens who are carrying their weapons. These are seizures of people who are convicted felons, using them to commit crimes, assaults, robberies, carrying them concealed without having a permit, those type of things. So, my main role is just to provide kind of an overall mission and guidance for Patrol Division and what our focus is on. I have 5 captains who each have a lieutenant that work for them over the patrol divisions. And so we work not just the enforcement side, but figuring out ways for better community engagement. With the pandemic, kind of everybody went inside, locked their doors, and nobody wanted to interact with folks. And so now we're trying to figure out how to get people comfortable with engaging the police department. So we have a lot of initiatives. We've done a lot of walks in neighborhoods, going to churches, just having a lot of community events.
1024, code 2, further.
31, Gate City and South English Street, 29 Delta, 3, 1050 p.m.
Most of our accidents, we have a very good fire department and a great relationship with EMS. So, they're usually here just as quick as we are. I mean, we may get on scene, seconds before them, or they're on scene before we get on scene a lot of times. So, and then just the relationship of working together. We know EMS has a job to do, fire, they have a job. And it almost is seamless when you get out here working together with the other agencies.
From my perspective, I think that's kind of the unfair expectation we put on our officers in terms of, we have this heavy workload that we expect them to handle, and then just literally at a moment's notice, you could be, dealing in a very bad car crash like that, one of those individuals could be drunk, there could be injuries, there could be children, whatever, and then you would literally finish that call and now you're dealing with a domestic or a robbery or something else, and and it happens constantly, and those things happen quickly. And so that expectation that our officers are supposed to perform 100% all the time, and every interaction has to be good and done the right way. It's a very, very high expectation, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have high expectations for our officers, but I think there could be some better understanding of what those expectations are, and the reality when an officer does make a mistake, understanding why the officer made that mistake. Was this the 9th or 10th call that they rode today, and had they dealt with some stressful incidents, and now they get on a call and they don't handle it the best, and it's got nothing to do with that officer not being a good person or not being a good officer or not doing their job properly. It's kind of understanding all the factors that come into play with that, and it's a daily thing. This is the work they signed up to do, but they come out and they do it every day, and they're busy every day. It's not like this is just, hey, this is Friday night and this happens Friday night. This is happening Monday afternoon, Wednesday night, Sunday morning. It's the calls change a little bit depending on time of day and day of week, but they're still just as busy. And I think to your point, at any point in time, they could be in the middle of something, and they have to be ready for it. The thing I don't know that people not in a first responder profession understand is the level of stress that brings on somebody. When you come to work and your work is just not having to be there and physically do something or manually do something, you have to be alert, you have to be constantly problem solving. Every call you go on could be a new issue, bring a different aspect to it, and so it's mentally as well as physically stressful and draining for our officers, and it's kind of hard to quantify that. I think anybody that's a first responder absolutely knows what that means, and I say first responder, and probably the folks in the hospitals, the nurses, the doctors in emergency care, work shift work have the same kind of stresses, but I think just your typical person that may work in the private sector in a private company, manufacturing, warehousing, that kind of job, just really doesn't understand the stress and the impact it can have on officers. And unfortunately, that's why I think we have so many health problems later in life. That's why we deal with struggles of mental health, depression. Therefore, I'll be out at the 1050 at Battleground and Hill, getting 2 vehicles in the roadway.
Person just weren't paying attention, swerved all the way over across the road, and we hit them on the side. It's this white Jeep right here.
Okay, just hang back.
Are you okay? Kate, are you okay? My daughter was in the car.
Are they okay?
Are you injured at all?
No. Just
Okay.
okay.
They use your ID and the vehicle registration to complete, and then
Yes,
they'll
sir.
have exchange forms, so you'll have each other's information, and then that will all be available on the report as well.
Are they gonna? So I'm not used to this. So how do they do the report? Do they go ahead and determine what happened right here, so they can write it up for the insurance companies?
So it's kind of an interesting thing. Accident reports we don't determine at fault as officers.
Movement.
So like here, you can do patrol, you could do canine, detective,
Yep.
accident reconstruction,
Traffic,
traffic, you can
SROs.
chase people down,
Yeah, we have neighborhood resource officers, which work in the government housing.
SWAT.
Yeah, SWAT. We have a bomb team, hostage negotiation, ATV team, drone team. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different avenues that, officers are interested in that they can learn about. So, and then, you a detective, you have, 8 different areas in the detective division. You can be property crimes, you can be a homicide detective, a fraud detective, a gang detective, intelligence, and those are all very different responsibilities. I mean, you investigate those crimes very differently. So,
Mm-hmm.